Well, guys, it's great to have you. Thanks for joining this webinar. I know it's not, interactive necessarily, but for those watching, grateful for you being here. There's a chat. So if you have questions along the way, just pop them in. Like I'll watch the chat, Blue. I'll pop in questions from the audience as we're going. So feel free to use the chat, guys. And we're super excited. So I'm Frank with Tithely. This is my bud, Blue from StudioC. We both build church technology, and we both help churches with their kind of online mobile engagement with church members, congregants, and people kind of in the community that are searching and looking to connect with a local church. So we met over a year ago now.
Yeah, year and a half now, almost probably.
Year and a half, yeah. We both love, our companies love serving the church. We love building technology that serves the church, and our products are really complementary. So we thought doing a webinar for you guys, probably mostly Tithely customers, doing a webinar for you guys would be awesome, so that you can learn a little bit more about what StudioC is doing. So Blue, I'll hand it over to you, and I'll jump in with questions and comments and things along the way. But why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself and how you got to StudioC?
I will. And first of all, before that, thank you very much for that. I've really enjoyed working with you guys and Tithely. Like you said, it's not just complementary in our product mix. I think our approach and our philosophy has been really complementary. Even meeting one took about 2 minutes for us to realize, like, one, we're on the same page, and two, I actually enjoy hanging out with this guy. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So much for that. So yeah, before starting StudioC, I was actually an executive pastor here. I'm in Phoenix, here in the Valley, for a church called Christ Church of the Valley for 5 years, but didn't start out in church. I was a marketplace guy, right? I used to joke sometimes. I'd say, like, those are the real pastors, right? And whenever somebody would call me pastor, it's like, nah, that's those guys. But have loved it. I will tell you, I started my career. I came right out of grad school. I went to an international school, and it was basically an MBA taught in German. And then from there, that got me recruited into a fairly large company called Daimler-Benz. They're the parent company of Mercedes-Benz. I was more of a marketing track. Right. And big takeaway, the learning that I say that you'll see as we even talk about StudioC and how it lent in is, I thought when I joined it, I thought I was going to get to do all these really cool ads for Mercedes-Benz. I was super excited. And I learned very quickly that the secret for Mercedes' success was not necessarily just in acquiring new customers through cool advertising. It was getting their existing customers to love their brand so much that they would go out and bring people into it. Right. So literally, we had that even down to a science where we knew we'd spend about $1,200 in advertising to bring somebody new in. But then we'd spend about $300 to get them to love the brand, ride and drives things. And if we did a good job at that, they'd bring 4 people in to the brand for us on average. So long and short, that was my takeaway when I started at Mercedes, and you'll see some carryover. Ran that play for about 7 years with MB. I then jumped ship to go work for an agency, an ad agency. So marketing, really in the digital space. This is almost scary because I'm that old, but this was the advent of the internet and this weird thing called websites. Literally, Frank, you'll crack up, but I remember going to Toyota was one of my clients, and we were building Toyota.com and Lexus.com for them. And I remember saying to a senior leader in there, hey, this is what we do. We build these websites, and it's about marketing. I remember, and he looked at me and he paused, he goes, website? Like, what do I need an internet thing for? You can't print a car. Right. But that's how early on in the days it was. So,
so just to interject, that reminds me of what I think is happening right now with AI.
Oh, it's very similar. Yep. It's a new
trend. Like early days. Now, obviously, the world is much more internet and tech and all the things, but there's this AI thing happening, and people are like, it's a thing, but nobody really knows what's going on.
Well, and it's funny because it's not just it's a thing and I don't know, but it's a thing I think I should probably get and I don't know what it is.
Right.
And so you have this gold rush kind of running towards something they're not even sure really where the value is or what it brings. Very similar. Right. So we spend a ton of time at the day just educating on this is the internet. How are we going to use it? What does it mean? But anyways, it was awesome. Ran that play for 8 years as a digital agency through the .com boom and bust, and fortunately back out the other side. At the end of that, 2007, and I say this because it was kind of a transition that led me to the church world ultimately, but my wife and I decided that this was just the travel and everything else was crazy. We have 4 babies and had committed to staying here in Arizona. My home office was actually in LA. So in order to have dinner, I commuted every day between Phoenix and LA for almost 8 years, which was just...
That's intense.
Stupid, right? Just dumb. So anyways, all of that made us say we're out. So we were fortunate enough to sell the business, and I took a year off. And it was awesome. I say that because that year was so transformative. We set 3 goals. That was it. Regroup with God, each other, and the kids. So I went on 5 or 6 mission trips. We packed up the family and we went and stayed abroad for a little bit just to kind of regroup on everything. And truthfully, I came home and I coached high school baseball for my oldest son and just loved it. So transformative change year for our faith, for our family, just everything was on fire for that. Came out of that, did venture capital, right? And the big takeaway, venture capital is you buy a company here, basically grow it and try to sell it. And I say that my takeaway from those days was really this idea of how to find something and scale it. So you'll see that's what StudioC is basically doing, is taking the thing we did at a church and just figuring out how to scale it for a bunch of churches as we go through. But ran that for 7 years. And then that 07 was so, like, as a transformational, as crazy as it sounds, my wife and I try to take a year off every 7 years. So 2014 rolled around. We took a year off. Only this time we said, hey, what if we serve the church instead of going off and having an adventure? So I called my local pastor, a guy named was Don Wilson. And I just said, hey, Don, I have no idea if there's a role for a Jesus-loving venture capitalist, but I'm available. All right. And I was really, really grateful that he said, come on board. All right, we'll make you XP. I thought I was going to stay for 1 year. I ended up staying for 5. And really, at the end of the day, all I did for those 5 years is I took all those lessons I learned over the 30 years in market from Mercedes and marketing ad agency and then venture capital, and I just churchized it. Right. I just said, I think there's an application for the same type of things that we're doing over here for a way cooler product called salvation. Right. So ran that play for, at CCV for 5 years, decided to go back into market. One of the things I built at our church was basically a marketing agency, right? And I actually looked for an outside agency first, couldn't find one that really understood church. So I said, we're going to build one in-house. Made the first mistake of calling it an agency inside of the church, and that made all these church people really, really wig out a little bit. So we rebranded it and called it the Studio, and then ran that, like I said, for a while. When I left the church then, and I went back into the marketplace, no big drama, just heading back in, COVID hit. And I started getting all these phone calls from churches, and they would just say, hey, I heard you at that conference, or we came out to visit you or something. And I kept saying over and over again, man, now more than ever, the Big C church needs a studio team like we had. That's why we decided to finally start StudioC. So the 50th phone call like that, we just spun it up, and we're basically taking all of these messaging and marketing, services centered on a technology to the church to help them communicate better. Right. That's us. That's the road that got me to here.
I love it. And hey, the name fits, StudioC, Big C.
I love it.
That's awesome. Well, let's jump in. Show people. So I guess just to put all that in like a box, right? Like it's technology, and you obviously do some services and strategy with churches too, but it's technology primarily that helps churches communicate effectively, like targeted communication with their, congregation. Right. And
exactly. I say it's a messaging platform with a purpose, right? We're trying to get people intentionally to move through some sort of a life cycle, some sort of a discipleship journey. And to do that, we want to talk to them with the most relevant, personalized message we possibly can. So it's a messaging platform delivered with, technology in pursuit of a bigger picture goal called discipleship making.
Yeah. Love it.
Should we walk through that?
Yeah, let's do it.
This is kind of funny. So, and before we dive into even technology, we'll get there in 2 seconds. This is really the methodology. This is that thing I was talking about, sort of the why did we do this? Now, I got to say, just as preface, because I'm going to offend somebody, I'm sure, and I don't mean to. Here's where this came from. Is in my VC days, I would get all these proposals for businesses. And one of the processes or the strategies that I do is I'd usually pause and I'd say, hey, can you guys do me a favor? Can you just go up on the whiteboard and draw the customer journey for me? Just draw the life cycle of what customers do. That helps me understand what you do as a business better. So when I joined the church, I tried to do that myself and say, hey, can I draw church on a single piece of paper? So this is my version, oversimplified. I know what we do as churches is more complicated, but oversimplified, this is church on a piece of paper, right? And I always say our job, and that's what I asked first was like, what is our job? But our job is to take this person up here. I just like to call them a not yet Christian, take them through some journey. So they spit out the bottom, fully committed follower of Christ, disciple, whatever term people like to use. And we do that so that they'll go out to their area of influence, their sports teams and their schools and their jobs, and they'll bring more people back in the top. So when actually Don had asked me like, hey, Smarty Pants, how are you going to grow? said, Don, we're going to take our existing members, we're going to turn into an army of salespeople, and they're going to bring people back in. Right. So if I were to take this life cycle, I break it into just two components. The top part up here, I like to call a prospect funnel. Right. And this is just, you can
And
Google
we should
that.
I'm just going to throw it, you've done it. I'm going to do it again. But like, these are terms, right? Prospects, sales, marketing, like they're all terms that sometimes can rub, the church or people that work in the church or serve the church, rub them wrong just because, they're, salesy. Like, but I think we just want to make sure people hear it, right? It's like, it's using these kind of marketplace or like commercial kind of terms, but applying the principles in the church. We know, like, we clearly know you're not selling, like physical goods or trying to make money or anything. That's not the point. But the principles do apply. Like a funnel is a really common way of thinking about, like, marketing your product and getting sales, and how many can you get through the funnel, and what does it cost you, and all these kind of things that churches don't commonly think about. Ultimately, yes, it's about people knowing God, loving Jesus, loving the scripture, all those kinds of things, but applying this stuff. It's just they're business principles that actually work well in the church with the right purpose.
I really appreciate you saying that. I will tell you, there was kind of two moments, that felt like I had. And one was, somebody asked me before, like, what's the difference between the marketplace and ministry? Working in both. And I used to always say that the marketplace on average tries to simplify a product or a process so that people understand what it's all about. I think ministry at times tries to complicate things a little bit, show how complex it is. And I've always felt like our job is to simplify it enough that somebody can engage in this. Right. And so I was actually sitting in a meeting very early on my time at the church, and the pastor was describing a discipleship pathway. And I just saw a little bit of glazed eyes. And so I kind of paused for a moment. I took a risk, right? Rolled the dice, and I said, hey, how many of you guys have ever heard of a customer life cycle or a customer journey with a marketing purchase funnel and this and this? And these guys raised their hand, and one was like, duh, no doy. And I said, well, this is just the church version of that. They use different language, but I'm going to actually translate it into the language. So the second thing I would tell churches is the people in the audience actually have already learned this language. So it's a way that I purposely use it because it's easier for them to understand and contextualize what it is that we're actually talking about. Right. So it is not meant to be offensive. And I actually use it on purpose because I'm trying to get us comfortable using the terms. Transformation of heart, Holy Spirit at work is absolutely what's going to do all of this. But the process is one that we don't have to reinvent.
Right. Yeah. Love that.
So the top part, like we said, and if anybody wants to look it up, it's often called the sales funnel or the prospect funnel or the purchase funnel, any one of those. But oversimplified, it's super easy. It just says that, hey, we're going to take somebody who doesn't know us yet, and the first thing we got to do is make them aware that we even exist as a church. So this is why companies come in and say, hey, we should have display ads or billboards, or I don't care. It's just about awareness building, right? But the goal of awareness building is to get somebody to actually consider going to church. Well, when I got in, I did a little study and found that most people, when they're considering a church, will go to somewhere between 12 and 15 different websites to consider that church. Right. So that's the number one channel we found in this layer called Consider as a website. What's kind of funny is I asked them in this survey, like, when you go to that website, what are you looking for? And more than anything else, what they're looking is to see if the church was weird or not. Right. Now, my words, but are they, playing with fire or whatever's going on? And what I found is that a lot of websites were designed around members, not around what I'm going to call prospects, people who are considering.
Yeah.
And it's not that what we do as members is weird, but to somebody who's not a believer yet, it can seem a little weird. All right. So one client I had, and I use as an example, had 21 days of fasting and prayer, which I love. But if you're somebody considering church, the first thing they heard was, I don't get to eat food for 3 weeks if I go to this church. Right. So I always encourage churches, no matter what size,
or like what's fasting or what's, you just don't. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we build websites for churches, have a product that does it. And we oftentimes are like, look, your website is it's your front door, right? It's your first impression on the internet. It's not, the thing that, educates all your small group leaders on how to be a great small group. Like, it's the thing that it's like their first impression, and you want them to know where where to find you, how to get a hold of you, what does church feel like and look like, see sermons, that kind of stuff, like the front door stuff, not everything for your congregation, for your actual membership.
And that's, you guys do a great job with that. That's easy for somebody to think through that lens. And if nothing else, just if this was my first time and I'm thinking about this, what am I going to see and hear? And it's funny, even when I go to visit churches, you'd be amazed at how hard it is for me to find their address.
100%.
Where do I go? How do I get there? And so that's one of the lowest hanging fruits is just look on it. If you're considering, which is the next layer, by the way, evaluation is typically a first time visit. Like I've considered it. This doesn't look weird. I'd like to go visit this and see what it feels like in person. And then they can't find you. Right. So, but that's the next one is really this evaluation layer. And my old world and the card, world, this is a test drive. At some point, we want to get them on the lot. We want them to smell the leather, see what it feels like. What we found, though, is a lot of people for the first time visit were treating that like a win, like they've joined the church. So they started talking to them instantly about getting into the, a next class or starting point class or joining group. And I used to tell people like, well, it'd be the equivalent if you came onto a car lot and I tried to sell you an extended warranty right away, right? It's a little bit early. Our studies have shown that the most important visit is actually a third one. If you can get somebody there a third time, then something like 65% of the time or more, they'll be there a year later.
Wow.
So anyway, then the next thing is we just want them to raise their hand. We want them to actually say, I'm ready to move from anonymous to known. I'm ready to let you know that I exist. So that's when the bottom half. So if I split them apart, you got the funnel, then you got the wheel. That's when the wheel kicks in. And that's this idea that I'm ready to be part of this thing. And we said then quickly, what are the things that we want people to do? Because we've found that when they do these things, the Bible has shown us that when they do these things, the probability of their heart being changed for the Lord goes way up. So I know these are activities, but it's because we found that participation in the activities has a higher probability of creating the transformation of heart. So this could be a little different for any church. I'd almost challenge anybody on the call here to think through their journey. What are the things they hope people to do? We draw it as a wheel because we found that people come into these things at different times in different places. It all depends on rhythm of life, spiritual background, their history with this, et cetera. But in general, it's commit their life to Christ, right? Typically through declaration of salvation or baptism, worship God. That means go to church on a regular basis, get into the word, prayer, et cetera. Connect with like-minded people. That's usually small group ministry, but it's also the context of why we do a lot of events that we do and some of the other stuff. Mm-hmm. We want people to serve others. So that's often on the campuses themselves as volunteers or in the community or go on a mission trip. Ideally, we'd like them to learn to share their faith. So that's for us was giving their testimony and inviting people to church and then ultimately giving, right? And giving would be tithe as well as sort of what we hope would be just radical generosity. Right. And then the last thing is sort of this idea of lead or coach. Now, not everybody will fit into this, obviously, but we always said the job of the leader is help other people through their life cycle and bring more people into the top. Yeah. But this was our growth strategy. This was church on a piece of paper. Here's our job. And then the second question I would ask is, this is what we're supposed to do. Are we any good at it? Right? Can we measure it? Now, there are two things that I said we're going to try to do differently as we got into this. First, we're going to focus on the bottom more than the top. Okay, from a growth perspective, I mentioned to you at Mercedes, we knew we spent $1,200 to bring somebody in the top. Roll back to this. Once they bought a car, which would be called purchase here, we spent $300 to $400 to get them to love it. The term we used was something called a brand evangelist. Yeah. And if we did a good job with that, that person would bring 4 people in. So literally, our goal, is to focus on the bottom, get people to do these so that it is our growth. They'll bring people to church. I told our staff that if we have $1 to spend on marketing and messaging, we're going to spend 70 cents on messaging our own customers and 30 cents on prospecting new people. Mm-hmm. You still have to do prospecting. You still need the full thing. We just shifted the emphasis. We're going to take everybody we've got and turn them into that army of salespeople. Right? And then the second thing we said we're going to do differently, is we're going to do that at the individual level. Right. So we've got this life cycle. And all I said was, I don't want to know in aggregate what it looks like. I want to know where every single person in our church is in that journey. That way we can shepherd them more individually. So I want to know where Nick is and where Jill is and where Sarah is so that we can help guide them through that journey. So 2 things differently. Focus more on engagement and do it at an individual level. This was all teed up to say that's really what we focus on at StudioC, helping churches know where their people are. And we use data. We'll show you how to do that, where they are in that life cycle. Match them intelligently to a step they can take next, and then have a platform to tell them how to take that step that we want them to do. And then we just measure the whole thing and hopefully get better every time.
And, maybe now that you said step, I mean, that's probably good framing too for some people watching, right? Like oftentimes you hear like next steps or growth track or discipleship track.
Completely.
Like those kind of, even maybe just really generically like the membership track, right? How do you become a member? Like there's these steps that a lot of churches have defined, and you're trying to get people to go from step 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. to 5, right? Like, and kind of go through those steps and finish them and know, like churches are like, a lot of churches are doing this. They just may not know who's in what step and how many have completed each step and if it's working, right?
Yeah,
Or,
that's the beauty of it. There are two things. One, I would say that almost everybody who's listening can probably put their church discipleship journey in there, plug it in, call it what you call it. They're very similar, but it may be slightly different. The problem is we're treating everybody as if we're coming through at the same time and with their same place, but nobody started at the same time. They're all different, right? So we don't know. And the second thing is we're not sure which ones are effective or not. Where do we need to pull the lever? Where do we need to lean in a little bit? So those were the two questions literally I asked for the first 100 days was what's our job? And the second thing is, are we any good at it? So this was a way to actually not only know, so you can target and message people, but also measure so we can start leaning into certain programs and get a little bit better.
Yeah.
So I'll walk you through kind of how we do the no match tell. Like I said, we do it with our solution that works impeccably with you guys, right? And then we do it with some services on there, but we'll use this person just called Emily as sort of a fictitious persona. But what we've loved is I mentioned to you that we really feel like the website is the best vehicle when you're in that consideration layer up top. But conversely, then we need a tool or a channel to work with the members once they're in that engagement circle. And we've just found that the best tool for that is the mobile app, right? And so this is an integration that we do with your mobile app, which is great. And what we do is we just kind of make it personal. You'll see the elements from what we've talked about. The first thing is I wanted everybody to feel like it's their mobile app, right? Highly personalized. We highlight these steps, and these steps would be any church's specific steps. They're not ours. So any church think of their discipleship journey, what they call it, how they icon it. We have 7 here, maybe there's 5, maybe there's 9, but all personalized. The key, and I'll show you how in a second we do this, is that we highlight if the person has taken that particular step, we highlight it in a particular color. And if they haven't, then we gray it out. So it becomes really clear, exposing to the member, hey, this is kind of what we hope you get involved in because we believe this will help you grow closer to Christ. And then each of those, not only, does it tell them kind of where they're at, they become call to actions. So they can click on these buttons and actually sign up to start giving. They can click on the button and start serving any one of these. The cool thing you can see is that Emily's in a different place than even David. Right. I could tell right off the bat that Emily's been baptized, goes to church regularly. She's not in small groups. She serves, shared her faith, but not giving and not, leading other people. Right. So that you can tell that they're different, and it helps the person, the member of the church, guide their own journey, understand what the journey is, and then know how to take the next step. The cool part.
I love the aspect of like they get to see these elements, like there's self-discovery that happens just by like, hey, church. Like people coming in, download our app, they get in there, they start, they see the content, they poke around, but then they see, oh, what are these? And like, what do they mean? And they can kind of self-discover like, oh, these are whatever. The new person seeing them may not know exactly that you call them like growth track or whatever it is, but like, oh, there's these kind of steps within church, or there's these things that, the church does. Let me learn more about them. Right.
Yeah. So, the marketing term for this would be a persistent encouragement. Right. So it's just, think of this, if I were to overstate it, it's a message or an ad that's always up there. And that ad is conveying, we hope you do these things, right? We believe that you're participating. It's not what we want from you. It's what we want for you. But I'm be clear, you'd be amazed at how many people, when we ask them, what are you gonna do? Where this came from is whenever I'd had somebody come up and they're like, hey, Pastor Blue, I'm ready to go to the next level. What should I do? I'd say, well, are you in small group, right? Have you started serving yet? Have you started trusting God with your resources yet? I'd ask them those questions. And so when I was sitting with our adult ministries pastor, I said, I think it's great that we know some of this stuff. We can go into a system and tell, and we help people with their discipleship journey. I said, but who's better at making disciples than us? The people themselves. They know their rhythm of life. They know what it is. What they need to know is the pathway, the journey, and then they can self-engage. So you're spot on, Frank. That's the intent behind it. But then the idea is we have this messaging that takes place, right? And so this is that messaging platform that you were talking about at the beginning. And the idea is that we're going to encourage Emily to take a step based on something that she hasn't done. So you can come in and you can encourage her to get into group, which makes sense because she's not in groups. But why would we tell David to get into a group? He's already in a group. And I will tell you, we had a very specific moment where this came from. I just joined the church, sitting in my office, and I got an email from the church. And it says, hey, Blue, it's group season. Don't forget to sign up for groups. And I remember printing it out, and I wrote on there, I've been in a group for 16 years. I've been leading a group for the last 11 years, right? What this email just did, it did 2 things. This email just told me you still don't know me after 16 years, and I'm on staff, for crying out loud. And the second thing it did, it told me that I can ignore every future email from you because they're obviously irrelevant. right? So I went into our comms person. I said, hey, here's what we're going to do. And I'm going to go on this journey, but we're going to get the right message to the right person at the right time on the right channel. Before we do that, though, let's just stop sending dumb messages out to people, right? And inadvertently, we send dumb messages to people, right? You can't make this stuff up. I had a client, I'm not kidding you, for Mother's Day last year. It's coming up this year, so heads up. But it said, I got an email. Hey, Blue, if you're a mom or expect to be a mom, you can't miss this event, right? And I just emailed it over to him and I was like, how did I get in this audience segmentation, right? Where did this come from? So at the end, we owe it to our members to know them where they're at and deliver messages that are highly relevant. It's not only more productive, a bad message can actually be counterproductive, right, at times.
Yeah.
So, and then the last one we just call it news and events. It's also this idea that there may be a message that I do want everybody to get, right? Go to the barbecue this weekend as an example. But even then, we want to tailor the imagery and the copy so it converts better. So Emily may get pictures of family and fun and et cetera, go to the thing, and David may get meat and sports and whatever else he likes that gets him to go to the barbecue. So highly targeted messages, no matter what, with a relevant sort of message that we have. So, we're not mobile app exclusive, and we lean into that. I still think it's the best channel. They have it in their pocket all the time. I call it church in their pocket. But we are really omni-channel. So I know you guys do stuff with email and SMSs too. We just like that they all work really well together.
Yeah.
Right. We're not anti-email or anti-text, but I do want them to be, synergistic with all of our forms. So we may invite Emily to join a group on the mobile app. If she actually clicks here and signs up, 2 weeks later, we may give her an email with logistics and details and a quick overview video of what it looks like and feels like. And then the night of, I may encourage her to actually show up and get there through a text message. So the idea is that they talk to each other, they understand, and sort of real omni-channel messaging approach. Other side of this is, I mentioned that website is predominantly for prospects. You can send out what I call a postgate website. I know you guys do this too, but a place where a member can actually log in. If that member logs in, then they see a very similar dashboard. Looks something like this. It's really only designed for people like me with bad eyes. Excuse me. So you can see the badges and what it looks like when you hover over and click on it. Here's all those targeted messages. One of the cool things is we're big fans of is exposing the member profile information to the member and let them clean it, right? Most churches, we are in the same boat. We were always chasing clean data, updated email address, updated physical address, but the people who know that better than us are the people. So we just give them an edit profile and pump that back into the CMS as it makes sense, right? Here's where it starts getting a little bit fun. One of the things that we also offer that works within, your mobile app, and we push through, is we're trying to inform, as I mentioned, we're trying to inform the member about the journey so that they can do it. Well, the other group that we're informing is the staff. So staff, and we'll know who they are because we tie to your church management system, staff gets this little search bar. So let's say Thomas works for the church and he's going to go meet with Emily and her husband. He can type in Emily's name and this is the page he gets. So you can see a quick overview of the profile. He can tell exactly where she is in her walk. He can see demographic information about the family. But the cool part is he can actually see the messages that the church has been sending Emily so he can reinforce it, right? And I can see right away if I'm going to meet her and I punch this in that she's not in small group, we're encouraging her, makes sense. We want her to go to the barbecue and whatever this one is, FPU or something like that. So arm the member to manage their journey and then arm staff to help come alongside and help manage the journey.
Yeah, I love that. When you are showing this staff and talking to churches, what kind of reaction do you get from folks?
Staff loves it. I mean, it's like, I usually get this, like, finally something. Nobody wants to walk into a conversation cold, right? And this way I can actually see some information about the family to reinforce it. But the idea is I also don't want to go to 17 different platforms to try to find this information.
Right.
The way I used it all the time is I'm standing out front and I'm just greeting people as they come out, and I may see somebody over there and I can look it up to find out real quickly, go up and have a nice little chat about, hey, how come you're not in small group yet? Let's get you signed up. Let's do some of these things. So it just helps guide the conversation a little bit more, but they get to do it right in the church mobile app, right? So they pull it out just like a member. If they were a member, they wouldn't see the search bar. If they're staff, they see the search bar. That's the only difference. Otherwise, it functions identically. Yep. So really, really effective way, I think. Most, not all. There's a lot of people in the church that are creating workflows in the CMS and doing things. Vast majority of staff is looking up members' information. Right. So they can talk. So then the other group, so arm the members to manage their journey, help staff manage the journey. The third group that we have available is to have group leaders help with that same process. So what you can do, and you can turn these on or off, is you can opt to have the group leader actually see the roster of the people in their group, but then also be able to see where the people in their group are in their journey, in their life cycle. So if I'm a small group leader and I look at my roster, and this is the page, and I see that 80% of my people aren't serving, then I may choose to lead into a serving initiative or pull up some content on serving or whatever that might be. But it's a great way to get the coaches, or as we call them, or the small group leaders, in the fight, kind of fighting along with this thing.
Yeah.
Okay, this is how it works. We just basically, we pull all this data in. We'll show you in 2 seconds how we do that. And we give everybody just sort of buckets of information, call it buckets of attributes that you can segment an audience by. So this little bar over here represents everybody, sort of total members of the church. And in this case, I say, hey, man, I'd like to speak to or send a message out to active members of the church, female, 25 to 40, baptized, giving, not in a group. Any data source, right? A 3-1 on the Enneagram, wears a medium t-shirt. If you've got the data, we pull it in. And what that does is it shrinks down the audience, right? And then the next thing we want to do is, now what do I want to say to them?
And you're just Blue real quick, like in our context, right? You'd be pulling that data from like the church management platform. So like a Breeze or Alvanto, like you're pulling that data in. So you're sitting on top of, Tithely customers' data.
Correct.
Letting them do the really personalized messaging in your platform and then pushing it, right? So that the member can view it in the Tithely custom church app, right?
Exactly.
So for folks like watching, right? Like there's the connectivity to your data in your church app. And this engine that you've built does all that like tailored personalization and that last screen you showed, like building the audience segments.
Yeah, exactly. So these buckets of information is all dependent upon what they have in Breeze or Avanto or whatever they have in their church management. Or if I'm being fair, some of them have like t-shirt sizes on a Google sheet. So we just imported that Google sheet. One of them had somebody take a spiritual gift test. So we took the data from the spiritual gift test and brought it in, and I'll show you that. So based on what you've had them done, you're going to get different buckets of information that you can segment by. But this is the audience that we use to figure out Emily, who's not in a group, female, isn't giving. And then we build her the message that pushes into your mobile app that basically says, type in the header, type in the copy, you can do image, video, etc., and then set the schedule. But this is going to be a little hack way to do it. This is what we use to create this message right here for Emily. Right? The cool thing about all of this is if Emily clicks on it, these things are dynamic messages, they're not static. As soon as she clicks on this button and says, okay, I'm in, I'm going to sign up for a group. Well, she instantly will no longer fit this attribute called not in a group because she is now signed up for a group. So she instantly doesn't see the message and it'll spin up the next one in the queue. It's a way to keep really relevant. Well, one of the things that's the best example I usually tell our churches is you should recognize people for their baptism anniversary. Right? Everybody recognizes people for their birthday today. That's actually not that special anymore, but there's nobody else that I know of that's saying congratulations on the best decision, being baptized. So in the beginning of the year, we go in and we create a message and I say, give me everybody who was baptized 7 days before or 7 days after today's date. And then I call your data and I look for everybody who fits that 14-day window. When they see it, they see a message that says, congrats for being smart. And then as soon as they get out of that 14-day window, they instantly don't see it anymore. But I only had to build it once. And then the system goes and runs and cleans it up and finds people.
That's such a good, I feel like that example like sums up the platform in a really simple way. I know it's, it does a lot more than that, but sending them the message that, congrats on your baptism date and lots of other, you can still do birthday, you can do anniversary, you can do, kids' birthdays, kids' graduations, you could do other things too, I'm sure. Like if they graduated from financial peace or if they graduated from other classes your church gives where you have a date on file, right? Like things that your church does. You can send these messages that are, or even like, I'm a dad of 3 boys and, VBS is going to hit in the summer. Like, hey, VBS is coming up in, 30 days. Don't forget to get them registered kind of thing. Like, but the
100%.
the non-parents don't have to get that message.
You know what's awesome about Frank, hearing you and talk about it, hearing you, reiterate it back to me and stuff. What it does is it says, I'm going to get some relevant information to people, which means that this now becomes the most valuable real estate for messaging. I think most churches historically is dependent on the stage. But what I like to tell them, when you're standing there, first of all, your people only come 1.6 times on average anyway. So more than half of the people aren't even in the room. And whatever you have to say usually applies to about 20% or less. So you're going to stand up there and you're going to use this as the primary channel to get people to go to VBS or sign up for camp or whatever that might be. But you're hitting a very small fraction of the congregation that this applies to. So you're right. It really lets you send out really targeted messages. And it's part of it is also to remain human. I tell people, be as human as you possibly can with your messages, recognizing them for a baptism or their birthday or a bereavement, or I'm sorry for your loss, whatever that might be. Those are incredibly powerful messages that you can now do at scale. We never used to be able to do that at scale. And it's a great way to actually make a church that's growing feel really, really personal.
Right. Yeah.
So, we can do email, but I know, you can too. This is nothing new. So you can still send, a message to the mobile app, email, SMS. The cool part, the one thing that I wanted to do is what's really neat is we actually have a message gallery. So we curate messages for some of our churches. Now, I hope they all, everybody that comes on has given permission so far. Anybody who's new, I hope they will. But what we do is we look for the best performing messages that other churches have created. We can track how they're converting and what they're doing, and we dump them into a gallery. So anybody who's creating messages can actually go in and say, hey, I want messages by baptism or serving. Then you get this whole list of them, and you can literally just click on load the message, and then it pulls it into your instance, and you tweak it, clean it up, whatever you want, and you're ready to go. Anybody who has spent time trying to find royalty-free images that apply and work and stuff, it's such a time suck that it just drains people. So nice little ad.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, churches love, give me the thing that works that somebody else has done that I can just, edit to be.
Greatest sign of flattery, right? I know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and then we just measure it. Frankenstein, this is, we just measure two main areas. Church engagement. How are we doing on moving the needle that gets people to actually join a group, start serving, start giving? So we look at that. To get somebody to take a discipleship step may take 10, 15, 20 other forms of engagement. I call it message engagement. So we track church engagement and message engagement, right? Now, this was from an actual client of ours. They gave us permission. And so this is for a 3-week period. And you can kind of see what's going on. A couple highlights I like to make is there's 2 ways that Emily could have signed up for groups. She can actually click on the message here, or she can go over and she can click on the badge up here. Both of them take her to a place that says sign up for a group. In this 3-week period, they had 686 message clicks, but they had 1,600 badge clicks. Guys, these badges, I actually I think of them less as gamification. They're more of that persistent encouragement. Every time I open the app, I see in there that the church thinks it's a good idea that I get into small group, that the church thinks it's a good idea because I'll grow closer to the Lord or something will happen to me. We want transformation of heart. And the biggest pushback I get sometimes is this idea that these are activities versus transformation. I recognize that. And the joke, I hope they take it as a joke. I always say, like, when Walgreens invents a pill for transformation of heart, we get to stop doing small group, right? Until then, we have to do the things that help create that transformation. So this is just a good encouragement to do that. Here's the other part that I think the reason we enjoy working with you guys so much is in that same 3-week period, they had 130 people view it on their desktop, but they had 1,500 people view it in the mobile app.
Right. It just makes sense, right? Like, people have their phone in their pocket.
Yep.
Whether they're in service or not in service, like, they have that thing with them and they're looking at it all the time. So website's great, but your members eventually are going to interact with you on their phone.
Totally. Yeah, they have it all the time. There's device functionality. There's all this stuff. Here's how we're making that work. You kind of alluded to this earlier, but we pull all these data sources and we just dump them into a warehouse. So every church gets a warehouse, and then we go off and send that to the various channels. In more detail, it just looks like this. We'll take sort of Breeze and Levanto data and we can pump it in, and we actually stand up. Each church has their own customer data platform, their own warehouse. We're not data brokers. We don't cross-pollinate it. The problem is that all of these data sources, right, from the CMS to what they're watching to personality tests, et cetera, they're all structured differently. So I have to normalize and aggregate that data, and we just dump it into this platform. Right? And that way I can see everybody by this. And then our messaging platform, the who's done and who isn't, who's baptized and who's not, calls the data warehouse. And then we build the message and we send it out to your mobile app, website, email, or SMS. And then to the extent we can, because everybody, operates a little differently over here, is we pull that engagement data back into the warehouse. So now I can take that same audience and just kind of keep refining it. Like, give me everybody we talked to that didn't open the mobile app, and they'll get an email. Give me those who opened the email but didn't do the call to action, and they'll get a text message. So all of that has to get held someplace. And
Yeah.
all of that engagement data gets dumped back into the data platform. So that's the wizardry. The cool part is now you have a bunch of data set up in this platform, so it becomes a lot easier to hook up a data visualization tool, and you can start looking at it and slicing and dicing the data however you like. Here's some of the stuff, and I would say this for churches, whether us or not. Right at the very middle of this, I just showed all of this software that we have that works, with your tool to kind of display it as a channel to put out there. Churches that are really effective think of these service layers, and whether you outsource some of that stuff to somebody like us or another firm, we've got great partners that do stuff in this area. I think there's sort of 4 areas of service. I'm going to call them agency, if that doesn't sound weird, or studio, right? And one of them is marketing strategy or messaging strategy. You really want somebody thinking, who do I want to talk to? What do I want to say to them? Right? So I don't mean church strategy here. I actually mean message strategy, build user journeys. When somebody comes to starting point, what's the next message we want them to see? If they haven't engaged, what's that message look like? Thinking strategic. Most of what we do is around technology, right? The way we communicate with people today is either email or form or something. So I love when technology works really closely with strategy. We also is communications and creative, right? The message and an imagery should be informed based on the persona of the person you're talking to, not the person creating it. There are people who have a science in creating some messages to go through this. And that's where, communications, subject matter expertise is great. And then data. This is the one that makes everybody nervous. But at the end of the day, all we want to do is glean some correlations. Help me look at that data so that it can inform better messages based on who I'm talking to, right? And ultimately, it's a whole nother webinar at some point. We really want to get to a place where you can start using that data to predict future behavior. So towards the end of our run, one of the things we did, and we can do with some churches, is we actually predict who we think is going to leave the church in the next 6 months so we can start talking to them today to prevent them from leaving, right? And understand that's some of the beauty that happens in this data. But if a church is sitting out there wondering, hey, if I had these tools and I'm ready to go, what do I need to run them? Like, what do I need to drive the car? It's thoughts through these things, and at least integration of these things working really, really well together.
Yeah.
So this is kind of, one of our last slides here. I was just showing up that these are some of the churches, in case anybody wants to look at some of these guys. These are some joint clients we have. Your mobile app, our member engagement solution, pushing into it. This, I think, was a screenshot from one of them, actually.
I know that guy.
Yeah, I know. I know that guy too. Works well. But yeah, and then, to the extent you're okay, if anybody has any questions, I just wanted to throw this up there so that they can get a hold of us or ask more about it. I know they can reach out to you guys completely too, but this way, if they need something, they can reach out here too.
Blue, while we have this slide up, can you think of maybe one story of like, okay, you came on the scene, you helped the church think through a lot of the stuff, put the tech in place, and then some sort of like outcome, like something that happened where the church was just amazed that they started using the tech in this way. And then it did something, right? Like from a ministry perspective where they're like, man, that had a big impact.
Yeah, and this just happened last week, and so I'm sure it's fresh. There's probably 10 better stories in this one, but it really, really felt good as we just went live with a fairly large church. Now, I would say this, this range is large of who we work with. We have churches with a couple hundred, and then we've got some, giga churches of tens of thousands that are in there. This was definitely on the higher end of this, but it was really exciting. So we went live, I think it was 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago now. And their first 2 weeks out, they came back and said, we didn't know where this was. We launched it. We had people log in. They started using it, but they uncovered almost 8,000 people that were listed as inactive in their church that went in and actually engaged in some of the messages. He said, so the guy sent me a text. He said, these are 8,000 people that we haven't talked to in over, some of them were 24 months. In 12 to 24 months, we haven't spoken to them. We moved them because of how their process, when you don't have any point of contact, you move them to an inactive record. He says, we thought they were inactive. We now moved 8,000 people from inactive back to active and then started engaging in conversations with them. It made me, I wanted to do a backflip, right? Yeah. You've now uncovered people that sit up in, I call them I call it the little old lady syndrome. It's basically somebody who sits up in the balcony because they don't want to be seen. They have a flip phone, so they don't log into anything to let you know. They don't check a kid in. They're not serving. And so you just don't know. They try to remain anonymous for a while. I think they still want it to be known. Obviously, they did in this case. They want to be known. And so that was one of the ones that I felt I was really, really excited about.
Yeah, that's super cool. I mean, I think it's just what you guys have built and how you think about it, like member engagement, via, digital, right? There's still all the like real church, like in person, small groups in the building, knowing your
Yeah.
people, like pastoral things that are happening. This is just that, like, as churches are going more digital, there's this new layer that every church on the planet is having to like figure out, like, how do I do
Yeah.
maybe not church online. Like, I'm not trying to kind of,
Yeah.
replace all the in-person stuff that's super important, but I am trying to engage with my church online somehow,
Yep.
some way. And I think doing it in a really tailored, personalized, like authentic way in a place
Yeah.
that your members are already interacting with
Mm.
you, like, you're just making it more compelling, right? And so you
Yeah.
bring together great mobile apps with great personalization, and it's like, this is how you should be doing it, right? This is like a step forward for churches doing, church online
For
better
sure.
and better.
I I love it. There's a couple things you said when back in my old days, automotive we're catching up to, we had something called the distributed experience, right? And the big shift that we made was we used to ask people to come to us to experience what we're doing in our brand.
Right.
And the big shift was, how do I take that to them, right? How do I shift it out and take it to them? And so to me, this is, rather than asking them to come in so they can get some information, how do I take the burden on us to know them and know where they are and take the message to them? So it's a distributed experience for sure. But the other thing is, it's keeping it personal. This is what I think is could be almost an oxymoron for people, is this is technology that makes the church feel more personal.
Yeah.
Right. Because ultimately you get to a scale. And what I said is, this is a digital version of a slap on the back. Is I literally used to stand out in front of our auditorium as people would come by, and I'd make eye contact, and I'd grab somebody, I'd shake their hand, and I'd, pat them on the shoulder, and I'd say things like, hey, how are things going? What are you in? Why aren't you in group? But while I'm having that conversation, 80 other people have just blown past me that we're not talking to. And
Right.
so I usually tell them, if you can have a one-on-one conversation, do it. It's better. This technology is not meant to replace it. It's meant to do that at scale to the best we possibly can.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Right?
augmenting it. It's adding it, right?
Augmenting it.
It's
Yeah.
something that's hopefully, enhancing what you're doing in the
Agreed.
digital realm, right? Not replacing anything in person at all.
Totally. Yeah.
Um,
And the beauty is these things can work in harmony together. It's not
yeah.
either or. Right. I tease a little bit that my wife, sometimes she shops on Target online, and sometimes she likes to go to the store. And I'll be honest with you, I have no idea what predicates that. I don't know
Yeah.
what makes that decision.
Well, I like, I'll reference kind of a study, but like Target, I think, has become pretty known for their, going digital, and it actually increased in-store
100%.
purchases, right? Like, they went really heavy on the kind of digital side with their mobile strategy and all that kind of stuff, but more people showed up.
Yeah,
Like, in the
engagement in my
building.
case, I don't listen, I don't want to oversell. We all oversell stats, so I'm not sure I have it, but I truly believe that engagement is going to increase attendance.
Yeah.
Right. If somebody feels connected to the church and they're engaged with the church, either through small group and serving, not only going to grow closer to Christ, but they're going to have a union with this entity called the local church, right, as the bride, and they're going to start attending more and building more connections. So I think the two are tied together.
Yeah.
And the growth is actually, there's no ad that I could ever build that's going to convert as well as you inviting your neighbor to church. It
Right,
just,
100%.
that's so much more compelling than any billboard I could ever do. And so I even told my marketing department, the job of an ad at our church is not to bring somebody to church. The job of the ad is to credential the invite from one of our members. So when you go to your neighbor and you say, hey, will you go to my church? I wanted that person to say, you know what, I've heard of them. Maybe they're not in your basement or something weird like that. I've heard of this thing. So that's what I wanted. And it's changed the mindset that these things can work in union together. It doesn't have to be either or.
Yeah. Love it. Well, folks watching, whether you're live or you're going to catch the recording, scan the QR code, learn more. Blue, this has been awesome, man. Thank you.
Frank, thanks for taking the time. I really enjoy, like I said, working with you and you guys, your whole team. It's been phenomenal. So thank you.
Yeah. I love it. Well, thanks, guys. Enjoyed it. Share it with your friends, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.